Welcome back to PM Express. My name is Stephen Enti, and I have with me Franklin Kujo. I did mention that later on we'll be jumping on the phone line to speak with Ben Efson. Ben Efson is now on, I'm told. Good evening, Ben, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, and good evening.
The debate is on again, and there have been issues regarding the kind of questions that come up and etc. I want to ask you, these debates, are they relevant in making people decide who to vote for?
Well, it's very unfortunate that there hasn't been any research concerning that. Hopefully, I'll make it a point that in our post-2012 research, we'll find out how it has impacted, because the only way you can find out its impact will be when you are doing post-election research work, and you find out what went into persons, especially swing voters, what went into their decision to vote for a candidate, then you can. But having said that, if I'm to judge the performance vis-a-vis performance at the 2008 Congress and their performance at the polls, I would say very little. You know, in 2008, even though it was debatable, many people thought that was about to change the then presidential candidate of the CPP did very well. That is not the unfortunately point in his vote, that the 1.3% we got was kind of an average vote for the CPP presidential candidate in the two previous elections. The total vote of the CPP parliamentary candidate was about 3%, and he got nearly half of that.
So it means, Ben, from what you're saying, you're not too optimistic about these debates and their relevance in influencing the voter to make a decision or not?
Well, in terms of numbers, there hasn't been any research, and I don't think that the impact that the U.S. debate makes on swing voters, that has happened so far. But as an exercise for propaganda value, as an exercise at extending the bounds of democracy, I'm sure maybe after this election, maybe towards 2016, it will make, if not, the impact will not be as deep as the U.S., I'm sure, to move forward. But for it to happen, it gives people items to chew on, but as an impact on who to vote for, unfortunately, I can't attest to that.
Right. So, what do you expect differently from this year's debates?
I think that clearly it depends on the questions which have been asked, and given that most of the issues have been tackled, it will depend. I don't know the format they are going to take. But for example, there are 4. Now, if the question they ask candidate A, maybe a question on something, they ask candidate B and candidate C. What if candidate A, who has had his shot already, has a valid point to make? Will he be allowed to cut across to make a point to counter what candidate C is saying? Or because candidate A has had his turn, candidate C can say something which would have been rebutted and get away with it? So for me, it's going to be, let's see how it goes. But I think that if we had that situation where it would be good to deal with 2 or 3 main issues and then allow the candidates to crossfire at each other within control by the moderator or moderators, I'm sure maybe that could be interesting to see maybe the candidate which will flip-flop, or possible that in exchanges or counter accusations, or if we get a candidate letting slip a major goof which will enhance his chances or which can bring down his campaign, that is a possibility.
Benefson, your line is a bit bad, so we'll drop it and then we'll call you again and we'll continue the discussion. Thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you.
So back to the studio, Franklin, I did mention earlier when I was introducing that the IEA has given 4 thematic areas where these questions will come from: the economy, social sector, private sector, development, industrialization, and foreign policy. Are these key issues which, I mean, those seeking our mandate should be made to address issues from these areas?
Well, I think largely they are, really. As you notice, these are thematic areas, and so clearly there are
for example, under economy, they list national development plan, job creation and employment, economic growth, national debt. And then social sector, they have social economic infrastructure, including ICT, education, health, water, sanitation, food security, housing, electricity and power. And then, private sector.
So unfortunately, all of these are fine. But these are like structured when you're having a syllabus for a course. Unfortunately, every syllabus, every curriculum has a research and development angle. If we do not hear anything about research and development in order to trigger these various interventions, I don't think we've had a debate.
Right. Frankly, we'll take a snappy break and then we'll come back. And may I now take the privilege to introduce Dr. Clement Park from the Political Science Department of the University of Ghana. Dr. Park, great to have you in the studio.
Thank you. But let me make a quick correction. Yeah. I'm the convener for the Forum for Governance and Justice. Okay. And in fact, I am an anthropologist by training.
I see.
But because of my interest in politics, I think that you cannot be blamed for assuming that I'm from political science.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks for the correction. Now, we've been discussing the IEA debates and its relevance. This year, we're told that the debate will take the form in which the presidential candidates will get to present their policy plans, and then also they get the opportunity to point out weaknesses in the policy plans of their co-contestants. Is this what we should have been doing long before this year?
Well, if you ask me, I think that the time is appropriate, because if you look at the history of our practice of this current form of governance, 20 years is a fairly reasonable time for us to begin to try new things in terms of, offering a platform for the candidates to demonstrate to the electorate their understanding of the issues, the challenges facing the people, and how they are going to profess solutions to them. So I think that the timing is right. And if you also look at the dynamics between the last election and this one, I also think that it has a lot more interest and expectation, because most observers believe that this is going to be a closely fought contest. And therefore, a platform like this that would allow us not only to hear their pre-planned, laid out, speaking points, would allow us to see how they are going to react to some questions that they may not anticipate. And I think that the idea of allowing candidates, to rebut or to try and expose inaccuracies or even challenge, proposals being made by opponents is a worthy one. But I would have hoped that there's some level of crossfire would have been allowed to spice it up, because that is really where we can get the sound bites.
But whether we spice it up or whether there is crossfire, are these debates relevant? Ben Epson, we spoke to earlier, said that he doesn't have any research data to point to the fact that the debates influence any voter's decision to vote for candidate A or candidate B. Must we continue?
Well, the argument can be made that by virtue of the fact that the large majority of our people have still not evolved to the stage where they can fully understand policy issues and sort of analyze them to understand their implications, both in the short, medium, and long term. that perhaps that could diminish the value of these types of exercises. Some have argued that these types of debates largely meant
for political
to cater to the
elites
needs
or the
of the
elites
middle
of
and upper
society?
class.
Okay.
Well, you know, if you go to my village of Doninga in the Upper East region, I mean, you know, we don't even have electricity, so you can't expect my uncle to even have the opportunity to hear this. But I disagree, because I think that these types of exercises may not necessarily offer an immediate feed in terms of the understanding of the population. It is what the interpretations are going to be after the fact. So that, for example, the teams that are very clever could put in place mechanisms in terms of translating the content and perhaps the ideas that are going to be on display at the debate. And they could also take advantage of highlighting the high points of their candidates, you know, and also highlighting the weak points of their opponents.
Use a debate as a propaganda piece.
Oh,
right?
obviously. I mean, it's a contest of ideas. And any time you have a contest of ideas, there's always going to be some propaganda value. I think what has happened in this country is that we have sort of bastardized propaganda. But propaganda, by definition, is essentially propagating, which means, you know, trying to bring some information to the attention of the public.
Not necessarily embellishing.
It doesn't have to be embellished. It doesn't have to be negative. But once you engage in a conscious effort to bring to bear some information that you seek to get some return for, that is propaganda. It
so
is not always
what
bad.
are your expectations really when it comes to issues
Well,
tomorrow?
I think that my only concern is that if you look at the issues that have been outlined in terms of the thematic areas that the IEA has spelled out, I think that they are rather too broad. And I sort of feel that the time may not be enough for
But
the
Franklin here
candidates to do
thinks
justice.
we should have done more. They
Is
should
that
have
so?
spoken about
Well, 3
pensions
minutes
and
per
land
question.
management,
No,
for
I
example.
agree. But perhaps those could be taken care of in the subsequent ones. But I was thinking that perhaps there could be some focal areas rather than leaving them too broad. Perhaps there could be some type of condensing, focusing on some of the key issues for this debate, and perhaps the subsequent ones move to others. Because if you take even one of the topical issues, which I think is dominating, the issue of education, you know, that alone is a subject matter that can be debated over an hour, if not more. And then you add on the economy, which is another big issue, and that has implications for even education itself,
And job
the
creation.
provision of healthcare, job creation, because all of these things in many ways are interconnected. So that is my only concern. But I believe that perhaps
you have
they are well prepared.
No, actually, let me say that when I talk about, for instance, pensions, land management, and the issues of R&D, research and development, even for research and development, it may not stand alone, because the fact of the matter is that if you don't do R&D, all these other thematic areas that you want to focus on, and then your various interventions would not be fed with
empirical data.
But
yeah.
like Dr. Park is saying, rightly so, that I'm not saying that we should add more to the thematic areas. My point is that you should be looking at those, what I call pillars of the economy, if you like. So, for instance,
And
when
you
I
think
mentioned
land
pensions,
management and
well,
pensions
I mean, I'm
key
surprised that
pillars.
I'm surprised that in other manifestos, there's no serious emphasis. We have no emphasis on land management. I mean, we have issues. Land management is not just about preparing the land for farming, as you think.
or building.
Of course, maybe building, but but there are other aspects of it. I mean, even the zoning of land and the fact that what could come out of it. Even if we wanted to use GIS, how do I call
Technology.
it? Technology. To even monitor the elections. It's all predicated on land management. I'm only saying that if we are not focusing on a few key thematic areas, pensions have a very, I don't know, but it's a gold mine, really. We have looked at some of the figures, and we think that pensions will be much more beneficial to the economy than even oil. Now, who is talking about pensions?
This is a new one.
Well, nobody is talking about pensions. Do you know that the amount of money we get from pensions, if they are properly accounted for, we wouldn't have to go to XTS Korea to go and look for money to build houses. Because we'd have been able to take a chunk of that to build decent houses for people. Now, when we talk about, well, you can talk about education, which Doctor is clearly talking about, because it's become a topical issue. You talk about infrastructure. If you're going to spend if you need $10 billion to plug infrastructure loophole, how are you going to get there? Are you, in actual fact, what's the pot of money you have to prosecute all these many things you want to do? So that, would it be wise to say, look, let's open up the country so that we can spin off, if you like, development, entrepreneurship, create entrepreneurial enclaves, so that people will begin to see themselves as part and parcel of the economy, rather than we trying to give them small free school exercise books here, school uniforms here, all these freebies that you want to give. They may be socially desirable, but the fact of the matter is that if we did the big picture thing, the big ticket transformational project, what you do, in fact, is that you end up liberating the entrepreneurial spirit that people ordinarily will have. And I've always said that the current arrangements we have, where the questions are asked of the politician, what would you do when it comes to NHIs? What would you do when it comes to mental health? What did you do when it comes to nurses?
Our generic questions
well,
that bring out no specific answers,
it also
right?
goes to, centralize, concretize the centrality of governance, that everything has to come from the center. And I feel that mindset itself is not the best. We should be demanding,
Dr. Park,
what can we be doing for ourselves as well?
I just wanted to build on that. I truly agree. I've also had a chance to go through the manifestos, at least those of the two leading contending parties. Yeah. And I think that the issue of land tenure is a very big one. It affects, even all of the lofty ideas that we have. Look at the challenges that we face even today around issues of land. So there is no way that you are going to even plug your infrastructural deficit without addressing the issue of land. You would agree that even as we speak, there are some projects that have been stalled, largely because of issues pertaining to ownership of land and the right avenues, to ensure that government can use that land to further development. But the other issue that I also found very interesting that I was hoping would be discussed is the issue of corruption. Because I've also argued that, we can raise all the millions of dollars, whether through internally generated funds or revenue from the oil and what have you. We can talk about free education or access to education and quality education. If the system continues to suffer from the type of corruption that, we all speak about, then at the end of the day, it is going to go to naught. So I think that part of the debate, I would hope that even now, if not for this one, we should also be looking at practical measures that are going to be put in place to sort of, improve our justice delivery system from the very beginning through the entire process. Because my own work as well is in this area. And you will be amazed. Even just last week, the UN came out with a report talking about how corruption in the justice delivery system in itself is a threat to the rule of law. And we all know, in this country, we can all cite certain examples. So I was also of the view that given what has happened and even with the statement made by the ex-president Jerry Rawlings, sort of highlighting my own concerns about how we need to work on improving our justice delivery system and tackling corruption through serious policy based on research. I was thinking that this would also be part of the conversation.
Do you also not think that the issue-based campaign and issues for this year's elections have been better than previous year?
Well, most definitely I agree.
That a lot of issues are coming up this year than they did in the last year.
In all honesty, election. I agree. And that in itself is a sign that, the electorate is beginning to take ownership of the process. And the way they respond is what is forcing the politicians to focus on issues. I think that by and large,
good, right?
They've become fed up of, the trivialities and the name calling, with our substance and the wild accusation.
And this you think is good?
Of course, it is
It's
a
good
sign
for
that we are
Ghana's
growing.
development.
But we must also credit the role of civil society organizations. If you want my honest opinion, I think that civil society has also played a very important role in helping in the advocacy and informing the people about the issues and helping to empower them to hold, their leaders and those who seek to lead them accountable. So I think that we can appreciate this as part of the growth of our system.
So if, for example, you had the chance, Dr. Park, to ask a question of all 4 of the presidential candidates at tomorrow's debate, what question will you put to each of them? Briefly.
Well, my main question would be what their policy proposal would be in terms of improving our justice delivery system. And I think that it sounds very simple, but it is loaded, because the justice delivery system begins with an arrest or an invitation to the police where a statement has to be taken. And the corruption within the justice delivery system actually begins from there. Police officers would demand money, even from people who have gone to file complaints. Sometimes they may even refuse to respond if you don't tip them or provide transportation. Sometimes they may take the statement, but they may take a counter statement, and some incentive would cause them to present the statement in a way. And then you go to the court system where dockets disappear.
But why is this,
and all of
why
these
is this
processes.
important to you?
It is important to me because you cannot have a just and fair society without a very robust, transparent justice delivery system in which the people can trust. Because once the justice delivery system does not have the capacity to be fair, then by implication, it affects the entire process, weakens the confidence of the people in the system. They begin to take the law into their own hands. They fear even to go forward and present issues that perhaps are even going to be in their favor. But it also allows those same people, largely the middle and upper class elite, who have the capacity to engage in acts that are fraudulent against the people through the use of their knowledge to defraud the system
Dr.
from
Park,
getting away.
Would you vote for the candidate who gives you the right answer?
Yes, I would say that my primary issue, as far as all of this is concerned, is a serious proposal to tackle the canker of corruption that we all agree is still present in our system. And I'm sure
Franklin,
my good friend here can give other examples.
What question will you ask each of the 4 presidential aspirants?
I would ask this question about our latest love with our resource, the new resource, oil, and ask what would it be? I mean, would it be prudent for a little African country that has been blessed with oil to be focusing so much on local content when the region, the West African region, actually mimics that the oil may run out in 20, 25 years? What would be the best thing to do in order to gain, I was going to use the word maximally, if they said the word like that, but what would you do in order to gain
maximum revenue or benefits?
Well, what would you gain? What would you do in order to maximize the benefits from the oil as you have right now?
And you will vote for the presidential candidate
somebody is able to
gives
give
you the
right
right
answer.
I'll
definitely vote for the
the reason I'm putting it this way.
But the reason why that's the essence of running the proper debate. Because Dr. Park, Stephen, the fact of the matter is that, look, when all these politicians make all these promises, it's predicated on, oh, there's resource here, there's resource there. Look, do you realize that the first oil gave us 440 million, the second oil projected 650 million, but we'll get 370 million.
You mean the first lifting and the second lifting?
That's what I mean. But the second oil, which is ending this year, is projected to earn Ghana 650 million. But it's going to earn us almost half of that, because the fortunes have been dwindling. So as a smart politician, what would you do? Would you still continue saying
sure the fortunes
90% local content or 70% local content? You're actually wishing for something that may not happen. So what would you do? Would you want to tax? Would you want to continue asking the Western region people to wait for 10%? Would you want to really help the Western region people, and then how? I don't think I want to provide the answers, but the best answer to me would be First of all, why don't you allow the entrepreneurial activities that are spin-offs of the oil sector in the Western region, let the taxes you charge them stay there to develop the economy. No taxes should be brought back to the center. It's a very effective, fair way, especially when the oil wouldn't inure directly to their benefit because it's a property. And of course, why don't you tax? It's interesting, I'm a libertarian, I'm talking about taxing because this is a finite resource. All you need to do
tax people to
tax
death,
much.
really.
Well, not that much. Tax that much. Use it to plug your infrastructure loophole.
You see,
and I'm telling
Dr.
you,
Park mentioned corruption. You could tax
but again,
as much as you want, but corruption.
but
could
Dr.
let
Park has already talked about the
benefits
fact
of
that
these
if
will
the
go
justice
away.
delivery, if he finds that any candidate would give any, I mean, he doesn't get any credible answer from any candidate in terms of justice delivery, then there are problems. Because justice delivery is not just about, as I said, those little messes that we extend to people who steal goats and plantain. But when you have greater thieves in government, and I use the word advisedly here, and they could be running around doing stuff, you've got to be able to use the same justice delivery to plug this, clip the
and clamp them
exactly.
down.
And clearly speaking, then people would have said you'd have arrived. I think these are very important
Dr. Park,
issues to be dealing
when you
with.
started your presentation, you said that the thematic areas were too broad. So, I mean, they've listed 4 thematic areas. What, in your estimation, are the 4 biggest issues that you would want the politicians to use as a benchmark for their governance in the next 4 years when they get the mandate?
Well, I must first of all say that I'm expecting the president to be squeezed real hard, both from the right and obviously from the left. I mean, we must understand that he's the man on the saddle, so his job is on the line. And
that will be fair, right?
Well, I mean, you have no choice. If you want to win, you must dethrone him. So naturally, he's going to be squeezed. So, you know, he's going to be the guy to beat. So we expect to see how he's going to perform. So it should be very interesting. But in any case, as far as I'm concerned, I agree largely with public opinion that education definitely is one that is dominant in this coming election. I think that the issue of peace, stability and security should also feature, because without peace and stability, all of these are lofty ideas are going to come to naught. And I also think that corruption, I think that also has serious implications in terms of all of these other ideas that we have. I think that that should also be giving some serious level of attention. And of course,
the job creation, housing.
Well, the economy sort of impacts all of these others, whether it is unemployment, job creation, housing. You know, frankly, would agree that all of this would be based on the ability of the state to raise the needed resources, you know, whether from within or from without, to support that. So the economy is going to be big. The good news is that the city seems to be stabilizing. I just saw, you know, a figure indicating that inflation was also coming down. But there are still questions to be raised about different aspects of the economy. The economy is very broad, I must say. So that in itself, I think, should also warrant a lot of attention. So this would be my top 4 as far as this election is going to be concerned.
Frank, I'll give you a final closing remarks.
Well, I would tell you that if you are, how are you going to integrate the informal sector into the formal economy? What's the plan? Housing, numbering streets, making sure, relaxing business entry rules. These are things that you might not hear about, unfortunately. Now, how are you going to do that? Because the informal sector we have said to be the backbone of the economy. How are you going to ensure, for instance, the issue about productivity, so that when you're paying 6 billion Ghana cedis for a single spy, and then you lament that the public sector is not commensurate, I mean, doing commensurate job, how are you going to ensure that? Are you going to go back and ask yourself, what's the science behind labor and productivity, wages? Should we just give wages because people have the same degrees and one is cracking his brains to work at the maths in an environment, sorry, in a company, accounting, whereas one else will be pushing papers? Should they be paid the same? What are you getting from that? Private sector, that that sector, which is said to be the engine of growth, how are we really ensuring that we are supporting them? Are we just supporting them by creating protectionist enclaves? Is that what we want to do? And then finally, I would look at the issue of national development planning. I think we should not quibble over this. The fact of the matter is that the directive principles of state policy clearly states what we want. To institutionalize the National Development Planning Commission and give it that power of deciding what we should do, I mean, it's just not on. In global, modern competitive politics, let the parties with the best ideas come and say, look, instead of doing this X amount of, building X amount of houses or building X amount of schools, I'm not going to do that. I think these other issues are also very important. So health, we want to see how we can support health. So there are a lot of spin-offs, but for me, as in addition to what Dr. Clement Park has suggested, these are very crucial areas for me as well. Of course, pensions.
Crucial areas. Gentlemen, thanks very much for your time. My name is Stephen Enti, and with thanks to you, Benefsin, for your joining us on telephone. Unfortunately, we were unable to get back to you, and thanks to you all who made time to watch us. Up next is Constituency Watch. Good night.